Welcome to this FSVP overview for food and dietary supplements. This presentation is about understanding the requirements of FDA for importing to the USA. It's been prepared by me, James Flynn. I'm the CEO and founder of Primority Limited, doing business as a global import agent. The first question to ask is, what is FSMA? FSMA is the Food Safety Modernization Act, and it's the key umbrella legislation for food safety in the United States. This little guy over here is Carlos. He's an FDA inspector. You're going to see him throughout this presentation. So FSMA consists of 5 main food safety rules. The main one, or the first one, is the preventive controls for human and animal food, and that is focused on US facilities. The Foreign Supplier Verification Program, or FSVP, which we're going to talk about a lot in this presentation, is focused on foreign suppliers of food products into the United States. There are additional laws around intentional adulteration, sanitary transport of human and animal foods, and produce safety for human and animal foods. But today, we are going to focus in on FSVP, the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. The first thing to do is to think about who are the entities who are involved in FSVP. And these 5 points are very important to think about. Firstly, who needs to register with FDA? Secondly, who is the owner or consignee of the food product being imported into the US? And therefore, who is the FSVP importer in the eyes of FDA? And who will be inspected by FDA. These things help us work out who is going to be affected. The key entities involved in any transaction of food products coming into the US are the FDA themselves as the regulator, the brand owner of the product, who may or may not be the manufacturer, the foreign supplier, who may be the manufacturer or not, the owner or consignee of the food product being imported into the US. This is quite an important point, especially when it comes to the FSVP agent. Who will be storing and warehousing the product? Any co-manufacturers, co-packers, co-labelers, and the transporters, shippers, and logistics organizations involved. And finally, the customs broker. So the key thing here is that each situation may place different requirements on each party, and clarity on who is responsible for registration and what the FSVP requirements are really important to understand. Hopefully we'll clarify this during the rest of this presentation. So looking at the entities involved, clearly we have the FDA, who is in place as the regulator. But who is it they regulate? They regulate the US importer or FSVP agent in the United States. It is the US importer or FSVP agent who is responsible to FDA for ensuring the compliance of the foreign facility. The FDA does not look at the supply chain of the foreign facility, but instead is interested in making sure that the foreign facility has control over its supply chain. This is to do with its own internal procedures and its prerequisite programs, and in particular its supplier approval and raw material approval programs. So the main entities which are regulated by FDA are the US importer or FSVP agent and the foreign facility. Let's look at some definitions typically used in the language of importing into the US. Firstly, we have the importer of record. This is the entity that imported the goods. We then have the owner or consignee of the food products. This is the entity that paid for or has agreed to pay for in writing for the goods being imported into the US. Notice that the importer of record and the owner and consignee can be different people, and this is important to bear in mind. Next, we have the FSVP importer. The FSVP importer is the entity who is responsible to FDA for food safety compliance. Again, this could be the importer of record, or it could be the owner or consignee, or it might be an agent separate from that. Then we have the foreign facility, and this is the last entity of processing or packaging of the food products. The important point is that the FSVP importer, who may be the owner or consignee, and it may also be the importer of record, is the important entity responsible for food safety. The foreign facility must be verified under the Foreign Supplier Verification Programme that they are in compliance with FSVP and the Preventive Controls for Human Food regulations. FDA is primarily interested in the US-based FSVP importer and also the foreign registered facility. So what is FSVP? It stands for Foreign Supplier Verification Programme, and the key requirements are that the foreign supplier or last manufacturer of the food or dietary supplement product has CGMP in place, which covers training, hygiene, allergen and traceability, that they have a compliant food safety plan with a hazard analysis, preventive controls, and with process, allergen and environmental controls taken account of in that food safety plan. They also need to make sure that any additives which are in any food product or dietary supplement coming into the US is legal under US rules. There are certain additives and colorings and flavorings and processing aids which are not legal in the US, which may be legal where you are. In addition to all of this, the foreign facility needs to have an effective recall plan in place and traceability, etc., to demonstrate that they know what the procedures are in advance of any problems occurring. All of this information must be documented and verified by the FSVP importer by law under the Foreign Supplier Verification Programme. And where there is no FSVP importer, an FSVP agent is required by law. It's important to remember that FSVP is designed to ensure that foreign companies operate to the same safety standards as US food companies are expected to operate to. And it's also important to remember that it is law. If you do not comply with FSVP, your product will be detained by customs and may be returned to you, or it may be destroyed. So the next key thing is to understand who must register with FDA. So registration is not the same as approval. In fact, FDA does not approve food facilities. It only registers them. So the purpose of this is to ensure that FDA has the information about where products are coming from, who is manufacturing them, so that they can manage bioterrorism incidents, food safety incidents, and rapid alert notification. So parties who manufacture, process, pack, label, or hold food must, by law, register with FDA. This applies to both US-based companies and non-US based companies. Being compliant for registration is therefore really critical for success in the US market, and it's only the start of the FDA compliance journey. Although it is the importer who is sanctioned under FSVP, it is usually the foreign supplier who loses out on business, so it is important to get this right. The reason it's important is that if there is an issue with any foreign supplier or importer, FDA will hold that on a database and they will detain it without physical examination. That's called a DWPE. So they can and do carry out inspections at the port of entry, and they look for any imports which do not have an FSVP in place or an FSVP agent where that's required. And particularly, they may look for a foreign supplier with no consignee, because this is where an agent is required. For example, if you're selling on Amazon, they'll look for labels which are non-compliant with the FDA labeling rules, and they'll also look for allergen labeling issues as well as adulteration and any unsubstantiated claims about that product, particularly in the case of dietary supplements. They also look for cases where there is no supplier monitoring in place between the importer and the foreign supplier. The reality is that FDA is now getting tougher with enforcement on FSVP, and that multiple importers are now on the red list and are effectively banned from importing into the United States. So FSVP is an essential requirement for exporting to the USA. There is no way around this. Another thing to really take into account is that FDA is now digital and is getting more digital as time goes on. They use FDA registration to feed into their risk management services and use this to identify products of risk where they want to carry out inspections. To enhance this, importers require a DUNS number. The foreign supplier also requires a DUNS number before they can register with FDA. This DUNS number is essential for customs clearance, both for the foreign supplier and the US-based importer, and it's used to track importers and foreign suppliers and to connect supply chain information. It's used in FDA digital systems, and AI and blockchain are the next moves by FDA to further digitize their controls. Another essential tool within FDA's toolbox is that they inspect foreign facilities. In fact, when a foreign food facility or dietary supplement facility registers with FDA, they will have to check a box on that registration form that says they agree to an inspection by FDA should FDA want to inspect them. This means that FDA travel all over the world and will routinely risk assess and inspect facilities that they believe are high risk or happen to be in the vicinity in which they're working at that point in time. This will include dietary supplements facilities, food facilities, packers and labelers, storage and distribution facilities. It will also include the US-based importer and/or the US-based FSVP agent. It's important to remember that FDA works closely with US Customs and Border Control, and also that FSVP inspections may happen every 2 to 4 years but can happen at any time. So it's really important to be ready for such an inspection if you plan to export to the US. When FDA carries out an inspection, they are very thorough. Again, they're going to look for good manufacturing practice, a preventive controls-based food safety plan or HACCP plan. They're going to be looking for allergen controls, product labeling procedures, supply chain controls, food safety training, ideally preventive controls, qualified individual food safety training, and micro and chemical testing and sampling records. And they may also carry out their own swabbing and testing when they do an inspection. So FDA food facility inspections are very thorough and are not to be underestimated. So your food safety management system really does need to be in order. FSVP importers also are inspected, and the FDA is looking for evidence of a comprehensive FSVP plan. In this, they're looking for details of the assessment of the supplier and their performance and their food safety controls. They're looking at allergen controls, labeling, how the suppliers are being monitored by the FSVP importer or agent, and they look at shipment records to ensure that all products imported by the US importer have an FSVP in place. FSVP compliance at the importer level or agent level is mainly about the records and verification activities of the importer, because they don't actually handle or process food products. So the consequences of non-compliance with FSVP, the first stage of this is a 483 warning letter. This is issued to either the importer and/or the foreign supplier and requires a time-limited response. Usually this involves a lot of hard work under time pressure, so it's best to avoid a 483 by having everything in order in advance. Failure to respond to a 483 can result in an import ban, and this means that an importer is added to the red list, which FDA checks each time a shipment comes in, establish if the product can be detained without physical examination. Prosecution of an importer can follow. As a foreign supplier, it's in your direct interest to ensure that everything is in order with your importer. So please ask them, what are they doing about FSVP? So getting things right is not difficult. The key thing is make sure you have a robust food safety plan, make sure your labels are FDA compliant, and that you have strong allergen controls. Also ensure that the correct party is FDA registered. Plan well in advance, in other words, several months in advance before you import anything into the United States, and consider using an FSVP agent or qualified individual. But most of all, be prepared to be inspected by FDA if you plan to export food products to the US. So being FDA compliant is key to success in the US market, but it requires initial and ongoing work and investment to ensure that you get things right. It's not only about compliance, it should be part of your business culture. There are many resources available on the FDA website, particularly the final rule guidance, frequently asked questions, labeling guidance, various other areas like Cornell COVID checklists, etc. And there are various other resources like import alerts, which can be very useful for you to learn how FDA handles issues. There's also the FDA dashboard and the FDA digital strategy documentation. A qualified FSVP agent or qualified individual can be a good idea, and this is what our business does. We help you ensure your product is safe and legal, and we take compliance responsibility for your products in the United States. We also deal with FDA on your behalf and ensure that you remain FDA compliant. And at any time we can provide you with valuable help and advice. Our experts do the work quickly and efficiently, and all records are stored in our secure cloud portal. It's our job to make sure that FDA is happy at all times with your shipments. So please get in touch if this is of interest. My name is James Flynn of Global Import Agent. My number is on screen. You can email me on the email address jf@globalimportagent.com or visit our website globalimportagent.com to find out more. Thank you very much.